Hello, everybody, and welcome to Radio Plays. My name is Sean M. Dale, CEO of Borderless Theater Company and resident actor who played Maynard Ladd in Emily McClain's wonderful play, Copper Angel.
And I am Kara Leimer, and I played Anna Coleman Ladd in Copper Angel.
Hello, I am Klay Brackney Wandelear, and I played the director of Copper Angel.
How are you doing today, Emily?
I am so excited to be here. I'm having a wonderful day. So,
oh, good.
Good.
So I'll just jump right on in with this first question. So how did you get started as a playwright? Like, tell us your path professionally.
Yeah. So I have really always been a creative writer, even when I was a child. And when I got into college and I was studying theater, I took a playwriting class. And just that really ignited this excitement for storytelling and for crafting stories for the stage. But then when I left college, I got a job as a theater teacher. And, for about a decade, that was like my life. And I didn't really get to do much in the way of like actual playwriting. But once I kind of got more established with that and life settled down a little bit, had my kids, all of that kind of stuff, I was able to really get back to it. And in, I guess, 2017 was when I really sort of started more seriously devoting time to writing and to writing specifically for theater. I finished my first full-length play, which was A Slaying Holofernes, in 2018. And then it was picked up by a development project lab called the Ethel Wilson Lab here in Atlanta. And then it was selected for production with Essential Theater in 2019. And so it had the world premiere there. And then it was just kind of like, I felt that surge of confidence and it became kind of a thing that I do. And now it's sort of like, we're also a multi-hyphenate now, right? You're an actor and a director and all these things. And so I switched, from being a theater educator, director, playwright, to now I define myself as a playwright, theater educator, director, actor is now last.
I feel that.
And that has to be so freeing too, to be able to say that, with pride. You're like, I am.
Yes, it took a long time. And I mean, I think it's hard because people, if you are a writer and if you write plays, you are a playwright and you get to call yourself a playwright. And I think it's really important, but it also is nice to feel that you're a part of that community and that other people do see you as that in that role. And they appreciate your contribution in that role too. That always helps.
Yeah. So how was it that you first came across the story of Anna Coleman Ladd, and what was it that inspired you to write Copper Angel?
So in 2018, there was a Vox media digitalization. Ooh, there's a tough word. There of some footage from Anna's studio in Paris. So they'd come across this, reel of film. They were able to restore it, and then they colorized it. And so it was running on loop, and Vox Media did a little viral video type thing of it. And it just absolutely captivated me. Like, I watched it just over and over again because it was her working with a soldier, and she was actually fitting the mask on. That was what the footage was. And I just remember being so enchanted by the way that she interacted with this man, the relationship and the rapport that they had. And the film is silent, obviously, but it's so obvious just from their physical, connection that they were close and that they were friendly with one another. And he was so excited. There's the little bit at the very end of the video where he looks in the mirror and he kind of sees himself with the mask. And I was just like, oh, it was such a neat thing. I think I saw it on YouTube. I'm sure it's still available. Internet things are here forever.
True.
It just sort of led me to learn more about her because I had never heard of this person before in my life. I did enjoy the show Boardwalk Empire which was on HBO. And there is a character in that show as well, and I don't recall the character's name, but he had a prosthetic mask similar to the ones that Anna made. And
Oh, dang.
that aspect, right, of World War I is very unique to that time too. And so it was really interesting to sort of dive into that.
Oh,
But yeah, it was all, this whole play was because this minute and a half video that I just got like sucked into. So,
when we were studying in London, I can't remember which museum it was, but they had a small section dedicated to Anna Coleman Ladd and her work. And that was literally the only, I remember seeing these, seeing her in the museum and reading about her at that time.
Yeah.
When we first started rehearsals, you were also you were living next to his hospital, a hospital with his name on it, right, Sean?
Oh, yeah, Sean.
Oh, I
Boston,
had traveled, I had traveled out there to visit my cousin and saw, all these landmarks that are mentioned in the play. And I was like, what in the world? This is real. It's like, it was great. It was great to kind of see all that life history.
Yeah.
So going off of that, you've spoken about the Vox film. So what other research have you done in order to contextualize the play and really drive home this story?
Oh man, I hope you guys are ready for me to talk for a long, so much research.
Please do.
Let us know.
Please do.
Yes.
Does somebody have a little sign where it's like, okay. So there are not actually any biographies that are solely dedicated to just Anna's story. She is included in several biographies that feature female artists, and then also this idea of women's role in World War I, especially the idea of the female ambulance drivers, or the way that the role that nurses played in the field hospitals, in that sense of where were the women, right, in this conflict. And the Red Cross did a really nice job of documenting her work while she was there. They were her primary funders, beneficiary, that kind of thing. So they were doing a lot of documentation. So they provide a ton of primary research on her work and what she did, and the raw numbers, right, of who exactly she helped, how many people. They did the same thing with Derwent Wood as well. So they were really great and useful in that sense. I think that the other major, not just for her life, but just the world of the play, because it is very different from life in 2021, in so many ways. So I was really into the primary research that comes from the UK National Archives. So they have digitized all of their primary documents, and then had made them available for free for everyone. So it's such an incredible resource. And I spent, oh my gosh, so much time downloading soldiers' letters, digitized journals, newspaper clippings. I was able to listen to recordings from radio broadcasts, that kind of thing, of some speeches that were given by political figures at the time. And I did really do a lot of research into the big ideas of the era. What were these sort of shaping thematic, overarching ideas that people were sharing? But I was also really interested in the individual and kind of how a normal person was reacting to these catastrophic events that were happening around them, that and a lot of the work in the portraits is where that research really comes out. Sometimes it's just a particular line. The line about the amputated limbs being stacked like firewood.
Oh, yeah.
That is a line from a doctor who is writing about his experience to someone at home. And that was his imagery that I used. And it was just so evocative and haunting. Yeah, that was one. The letters that shaped the wife's portrait So the woman who her husband comes home and he was not a recipient of any kind of treatment, and he ends up taking his own life. She wrote a letter, and this is very sad, to apply for his veterans' widow's benefit. So the letter where she's explaining what happened is because the policy was that if someone died by suicide, that they did not, the widow benefit was not paid out. So she was trying to...
Because they didn't die in war.
Right.
Well, they didn't die in war, and they didn't die in, I guess, at the time, what they considered to be like an appropriate...
Yeah.
Natural causes or
death,
whatever.
Yeah.
Precisely. So like it
Wow.
that letter haunted me a lot. And I think that it was one that, even though, because again, the frame of that story is that this soldier did not receive proper treatment. He was sent home, and obviously he was disfigured and dealing with PTSD, which of course that's another aspect of the research that I did too, was like this condition was really just starting to be identified. That's a really remarkable thing about World War I, is that this is the first time that we really have medical professionals being pushed to view mental health as just as important as the physical. That dichotomy that Maynard really expresses about, you're healed, you're fine, you should go on about your life. Aren't you grateful? And that becoming a recognition that it wasn't just about the physical body. There was healing that had to happen internally as well. And World War I is sort of where we see that change and that shift. And there was a lot going on in the world too. I mean, we have the advent of, Freud and psychology as a whole science in and of itself at that time too. So, I don't fault them for not knowing about it necessarily, but that it just is very interesting, the role in which that change plays in the society, and then how that trickles down to these normal people's lives. There was one other portrait that was a primary source. The priest who asked the wounded soldiers not to attend mass anymore because it was upsetting to the other parishioners. That was based on a letter as well. And the priest was writing to, I guess, someone further up the chain for advice. He didn't know what to do. He really felt very uncomfortable with, and so I don't know what happened with that, because I only have one side. I couldn't ever find the response, to it. So I don't know what response he got back.
Wow.
They're all such gorgeous portraits too, like those three especially. It
was. I love the one with the wife, like that one. It gets me. So
yeah.
One thing that I was going to say, just kind of as an extension of what you just said on your research and everything, you've said where the ideas for those portraits and stuff came from. But are there any parts of the script of Copper Angel that is actually verbatim from those texts that you found?
The letter that he left her in the wife portrait, that is verbatim.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah. And then I think I mentioned the firewood image.
Yeah.
That was taken from a letter. And then the text of the recruiter's speech is it's a combination of a couple of different radio addresses that were given towards the midpoint of the conflict. And I thought that was really interesting, because it was still really pulling those like patriotic heartstrings. And I thought it was very interesting that they were still doing that same tactic so many years. I mean, it was, 3 years into the conflict by that point.
Yeah.
So Anna and Maynard are obviously figures taken directly from history. But what about Clarence? Did you model him on any specific soldier?
So Clarence is a work of fiction. He is an amalgam of a couple of different soldiers' experiences they were writing in letters from a recovery hospital in France. So they would have been similar experiences to what Clarence went through, but they had different injuries. None of them had facial injuries like he does. But the biggest thing about it is that there was a soldier who had been told that he could return to the front. And he wrote a letter to his sister that he was expressing fear about doing that he didn't want to go back. And he was hoping that he wouldn't have to. And he was afraid that made him a coward. And that conflict and that sense of you have this fear, and very justified fear, about going back to this place where you've been injured, and yet still feeling like that makes you a coward. That really stuck with me, and I wove that into Clarence's experience as well. And then a lot of his feelings about survivor's guilt and about his coping with his own trauma. Some of that is based on contemporary veterans' accounts. And I have quite a few friends who served or, are serving, but did serve more in Afghanistan and Iraq. And when they were coming home and just hearing them talk about reintegrating into civilian life and kind of some of the things that they struggle with, and wanting, especially the idea of Clarence really wants not to be a burden when he goes back. And it's very important to him that he is able to contribute to, his family and to society as a whole. That idea is a little more contemporary. So I didn't pick that up from the soldiers' letters necessarily, although I'm sure that they probably did feel that way back then. But that in particular is something that comes from friends and family.
So he's sort of a metaphor, if you will, for the machine of war, if you could call it that.
Yeah, so in addition to sharing this beautiful history of the lads and everything, what I love so much about this play is the beautiful drama that you've crafted in this story. So what parts of the play, specifically in Anna and Maynard's lives, what parts of that are taken directly from history? And where does the story of Copper Angel differ a little bit from that or fill in some gaps?
Right. So their historical record is kind of the starting point for it. A lot of the marital strife that's mentioned in the play and that is dealt with, that is a work of fiction, as far as I know. That is my interpretation of what their relationship might have been like. But I feel, especially looking at the significant age difference, I think that maybe makes sense. He has a little bit of a paternalistic attitude towards her, protective, a bit fatherly, and wanting her to behave in a certain way and be the kind of model doctor's wife. And she had desires to do something more than that. And she has this wonderful gift and this talent, and she saw a way for that to be useful. And so I think that the tension and the conflict, even though I did, create that as a work of fiction, it is drawn on this foundation of their basic relationship. And then the other thing that is more fiction than not is Maynard's lack of a hugely successful career when he returned from the war. He didn't. It wasn't to the level that it is in the play, but he didn't ever achieve the leading the hospital and being kind of an ultimate goal of having that kind of political aspirations that he had. Those never materialized for him. So in the world of the play, it's because he develops a morphine addiction based on dealing with a lot of the things that he saw as a surgeon, but that is not based on any concrete historical fact.
Gosh.
Yeah,
it was heartbreaking to see kind of his arc and then go through all of his aspirations and then just to find out that he really doesn't get to fulfill any of that. That was, as Sean the actor, difficult to see that through. It was like, oh man.
Yeah, and I loved actually that aspect that it brings out, the PTSD and the trauma and everything that the medical people experienced, as well as the soldiers.
Sure, yeah.
Speaking of history, awesome segue. What sort of history has Copper Angel had thus far? And if not, how was it to listen to it fully produced? How did that feel?
So it was slated to have its world premiere production in Texas, and then COVID happened. So it was a COVID creative casualty, like so many. I mean, that's a very so it hasn't had a stage production as of yet. I was fortunate enough to get to do a focused intensive with some actors right prior to Borderless recording of it. And so I was able to do a little bit of rewriting and tweaking of the script that I was really grateful to be able to do. And then sending y'all a much stronger, I felt like much stronger product than the initial draft.
Again, the writing lent itself to have great performances. You know what I mean? The characters were so well crafted and the writing just flowed so easily that it made our jobs very easy.
They say 30% of directing is picking a good script and 50% of directing is picking a good cast. So
100, yeah. Yeah, for sure. So have you written any other works of historical drama?
That would say, if I had to say like a favorite genre of mine, it would be historical drama for sure. The play I mentioned earlier, Slaying Holofernes, is a dual timeline story, one with Artemisia Gentileschi, who is a Renaissance female painter, and then a modern day woman, and their stories interweave together. And it's one of the few recorded court cases that we have a very full transcription of what went down with all of that. So that historical record existed. And then she went on to be just an accomplished painter in her own right. So, you know, it's always been something that like I really enjoy. I have My Brother's Secret Keeper, which is the story of the only performance that the Booth family did all together. So Edwin Booth and his brother Junius, and of course their baby brother John Wilkes, were only on stage together one time. They did a performance of Julius Caesar as a benefit to raise money for a statue of William Shakespeare to be put up in Central Park. Which it's there, you can go and visit it. But it happened about 5 months before John Wilkes assassinated Lincoln. And so the play deals with their, I guess, like their sibling dynamics and kind of what drove a member of this family that was actually quite pro-abolition and very vocal supporters of the Union to be radicalized in the way that he was. So that was a lot of fun to dive into that messy part of our country's history.
There's a lot of fun parallels that you could draw as well.
And
between,
for real, I didn't like when I wrote, because I wrote that, I mean, it was in, Trump era, obviously, but looking at that through the lens of everything that happened January 6th and all of that. Oh, the other one that I'm not quite finished with yet, but I'm working on my first screenplay. It's based on Harry Houdini's autobiography, A Magician Among the Spirits. It entered the public domain in 2019, and there's a woman that he worked with. Her name is Rose Mackenberg, and she would go in disguise to these fake mediums and people that were claiming to be able to talk to the spirit realm. And because, spiritualism was huge in the 1920s. And she would like help Houdini expose them. And so they have this kind of like fun buddy comedy caper kind of thing, sort of a like, it's like Sherlock Holmes meets Charlie's Angels a little bit is the vibe. So anyway, I'm working on that, but it's really, that's been a hard shift for me because I've only ever written for stage. And so writing for screen is very different. And so that's been a learning curve. But the thing I love so much about historical drama as a genre is this idea that you have some distance. And so you're looking back at this world that's very different in so many ways, but that's still these resonant parallels that you draw, and that some things haven't changed very much. And so having this window into another world that then helps you process what's going on in our world right now, that's the key of historical drama. That's why it's interesting to me, is that it helps us to make some sense of what's going on now, because we can learn and we can do better, make all new mistakes.
Yeah.
That idea. And then it's never just about the single historical event for me. It's always about how it relates to what's happening now too. Because when I started writing Copper Angel, I did want to talk about how we treat veterans and the care that veterans in 2019 and 2020, what do they have access to? What do we do to support them as a society, as a government, as a entity when they come back, and how can we do better with that? And so looking at the treatment of the soldiers in World War I kind of helped me to think about what are the ways that we could be better serving the men and women who serve.
Yeah, so you mentioned working on your first screenplay script. Are there any other projects that you're working on at the moment?
So I have been pretty prolific during the pandemic, and I've been extremely fortunate to have the time and space and support to be able to do that. So the screenplay is my big major project, and that's pretty scary. But then I've had quite a few 10-minute shorter plays that tend to be more comedic. That's kind of where I flex that muscle in that shorter format. I don't tend to write a lot of like full-length comedies. Those are almost always going to be dramas, but it's just easier to write a funny story in a 10-minute format. And then I'm diving back into the world of risk theater, which, if you're not familiar with that, Edwin Wong wrote a book about, it's sort of a new model of like modern tragedy, and it's called Risk Theater. And he's brilliant, and I highly recommend his book. It's very cool, but I'm going to try. I wrote one which was called Children of Combs and Watch Chains, which was like a dark twist on that O. Henry Gift of the Magi story. And spoiler, it's sad. It doesn't end happy for anybody in that story. But it did really well at he has a competition, playwriting competition for Risk Theater. And so it was a finalist for that last year. So I am working on one same kind of format, tragic, within this structure that he's created. So
where do you find your prompts, and how do you go about finding these new prompts for new writing and everything?
It's lots of different places all over the place. So I wrote a play called Aunt Zelda's Painting, and it was about, because I listened to a lot of true crime podcasts, and there was a story about the rediscovery of a stolen work of art that was in the bedroom of a nice little old married couple that lived in Tucson. And the painting was worth $80 million or something like that. God. And it was this extremely rare de Kooning painting, and it had been behind their bedroom door in their little house since they stole it in the 70s. And he was
they stole it.
He was a high school English teacher, and she was a librarian, and they stole it back in the 70s. And then their niece and nephew, when they were cleaning out their house after both of them passed away in 2017, found this painting, and they were like, this is, because it didn't go with any of the rest of the decor in their house. It was like this random thing. Snap. And they had somebody come out and it was like, this is a real de Kooning. They stole this. So anyway, like that story, I was just like, oh, that would be so fun. And so I did sort of a more farcical take on it. So they decide, like the family members that find it, they figure out what they've got, and then it becomes the internal family drama of like, let's turn it in. We need to do the right thing. No, we need to sell it on the black market. The mob gets involved. Like it gets crazy. Anyway, so sometimes it's like that kind of thing. Obviously, like I'm very interested in historical, stories, untold stories about especially women that, have been kind of overlooked or forgotten in history. Inspiration comes really from anywhere. So I'm having my other like little sort of fun side gig that I'm doing is I write for a children's educational podcast called Ask Dear Abby, where animals write in or call in with problems, and Dear Abby gives them advice. And so I'm a freelance writer for them. And it's super cute. It's a lot of fun, but I get to do each episode has 2 pun-based animal commercials. And so that's been my favorite part of that. I feel like I'm a writer on Bob's Burgers, like they have the pun, the burger of the day and all of that.
Love it.
And so, yeah, that's been, that was a lot of fun to get to do and to flex that muscle a little differently.
Well, before we start wrapping up here, why don't you inform our listeners where they can find you and see more of your work?
Sure. So I'm based in Atlanta, but thanks to the magic of the internet, my work and everything is up on New Play Exchange, which if you are a writer or creative type in the theater industry, I really recommend getting on that service because it's amazing. It's such an incredible resource for just new work and that kind of thing. I'm working on getting a professional website up. That's kind of a goal for the summer. So we'll see how that goes. I get like, yeah, I'm totally going to do it. I need to do this. This is the like grown up thing to do. And then I'm like, that seems like a lot of work. And
That's been my goal 3 summers in a row. So
okay. That's makes me happy to hear that it's sort of riding for a little while.
You know what's funny though? Like, I don't know about you guys, but it's easier for me to do more things for other people than it is for myself. So like,
100%.
You know what I mean? So like the Borderless website, for example, it's like I knocked that out. It was fun. I was like, all right, cool. My website has not been updated since like June. We just need to prioritize ourselves sometimes.
Oh yeah.
That's right.
So working with Borderless obviously is, and connecting with all of y'all has been incredibly wonderful, and getting to collaborate with different groups in Zoom and sort of not be hindered by geographic limitations has been really incredible. And so I have a lot of more stuff actually on like the West Coast and that kind of thing. I'm working with Garage Theater Ensemble. I wrote a 1-act horror thriller called Owl Creek, and they are doing that as a intensive to a production or a virtual production of it that'll happen in March.
They're out in LA, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
I was just talking about them the other day. Yeah.
So I'm working with them and I'm pretty excited about it. We had our first meeting yesterday and it was crazy because it was like, man, I never would have had this opportunity, to connect with these theater artists all over the world. It's wild. So I'm really grateful for that. Yeah, I think that's it. I know Quarantine Players did a reading of Children of Combs and Watch Chains, which is the Risk Theater tragedy, and that's up on it's a podcast and a YouTube video recording, and they're searchable on all of the different platforms for that too. So
is there any advice that you might have for writers that are just starting out?
I love that you all ask this because this is like the teacher heart in me. It's like, yes, please, like prop the door open, make it easier for people coming behind you. God, that's the deal. So my biggest piece of advice for people wanting to write really anything, but especially for theater, is to find a group. Find a group of artists that you trust that can help you with your work, because you need to hear it. You need to hear the words spoken by actors out loud. It can't just be voices in your head. It can't just be you reading the words, because you know what you want it to sound like, and you can lie to yourself. You can cheat and make it how it's supposed to sound, but until you hand it to somebody and let them take it and do something with it, and to see if it has legs, to see if it can walk on its own without you there holding its hand. That's the biggest thing. And writing is very isolating and it's very lonely. And so I think having a group, either a professional organization that you're, a part of, like a dues paying member kind of thing, or if it's just like you bullying people that you know into getting on a Zoom call with you and, reading the play that you sent them and telling you what they think. and being that for them as well, right? That it's this two-way street, and having that collaboration and that trust is super important. And so, like, that's my biggest piece of advice. And then really just read and see as much theater as you possibly can. And I know that's really tough right now to see anyway. Although I don't know, I love listening to plays. Like, that has been a lifesaver. I mean, I told you I listen to a lot of true crime podcasts, and I do. But also I've been listening to, Quarantine Players, and when the radio plays started, and I've listened to all of those, and I've listened to Between Acts, which is another group that does audio drama of theater. And it's a great way to expand your understanding of dramatic literature, what is possible with storytelling and with, the theatrical form, because you don't know. Nobody knows what all we can do until you see other people, and then you can kind of take those ideas and build on them and reinterpret things. And it's wonderful to see that happen. So that's my advice. Be like, I tell my students, and I try to live this myself. Stella Adler has the concept of the warrior artist, right? That you are a champion of your own work, and you're a champion of your fellow artists. And I love that metaphor, right? And it's that you find a group and you collaborate and create together. And that's what y'all did.
It is.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's how you make things happen. Don't wait for the gatekeepers to tell you that you're ready. Figure it out on your own.
100%. That's beautiful.
Drop the mic. We're done here.
I was gonna say, I'm like, that is the best way to just put a pin on that. But thank you, Emily.
Absolutely. Thank you for being with us, Emily.
Thank y'all so much. Like, seriously, this whole process has been super exciting, and just I'm really looking forward to hearing it.
We're as honored that
Absolutely.
you left it in our hands. So, yeah.
Yeah.
So, thank you. Yeah.